So I am fulfilling my own wish here by sitting here and talking about my own composing, which is fulfilling another set of wishes that when I was in my 20s and just learning to play classical guitar, self-taught, I mean this is back in the 70s, so there wasn't nearly as much access to information or community, and I had none. No information, no community, but I did love the music of Bach, and I loved the way the guitar felt under my hands. And then I eventually started making guitars out of the same instinct. It's like, well, I guess I'll just make a guitar. I can't buy one. I was too poor to buy one, so I thought I would just make one. And it was like silly kind of pipe dreams of the 70s. Not silly, but pipe dreams for sure. And at the same time that I was learning to play guitar, mostly Bach was the music that really caught my attention. I wasn't that interested in other Spanish repertoire, other general repertoire. I really liked that the weight of the Bach. And that got me started, but it was all just seemed fun to write, just to find riffs, to play and write music. And nobody told me not to do that back then. And so that was, just seemed like it kind of went hand in hand. You play the guitar, okay. You write music for guitar, why not? Anybody can do it. And that was the assumption. And then I thought, well, if you play the guitar and you write music for the guitar, then you can make a guitar, right? That's just goes without saying. And so that was how I got started. And I was too ignorant to know any different, and naive. But eventually what did stick was building guitars. It stuck as a paying gig, as a job, but also as a wonderful, wonderful pursuit of dealing with wonderful exotic smelling woods and the design and the history and tools and learning the skills and all of the techniques that you can develop going along was just like a big puzzle, a very beautiful puzzle. And then ultimately the sound and the beauty of the sound of the guitar. And it's like pretty hard to find a guitar that just hurts your ears. I mean, some are better than others, but guitar is just beautiful. And so you could be pleased with it from the beginning and just hopefully get more pleased as you go along, but never really offended by it. Anyway, so building guitars became a career, and I've done a lot of that, and that's not what I really want to talk about so much today, although I'm open to it. The guitar that I've got here is one that it's a fairly recent, it's less than a year, and it's sort of a prototype for upgraded design. It's got a bunch of different 21st century features, but it's still a guitar. And I'll get a chance to play it here in a little bit and talk about it a little bit. But the cool thing, what I've really has been sort of the upper motivation in the last 3 years, and to some extent the last 5 years, was getting into composing again. After being, in the course of self-teaching and then getting more teaching positions and becoming more involved in the social realm of classical guitar, I discovered I had to learn repertoire. I had to, and I wanted to, but to build concert programs and stuff like that. So I did, Scarlatti and Villalobos and Targa and Albanius and whatever, and other things. I got more interested in some stuff that was more off to the side than those things, but I had to learn them. And that, somehow or another, shoved composing to the side. But one thing, it was pretty skeptical. You can't be a player and a composer. I guess, I don't know whose idea this was, but in the classical world, it's kind of like not cool, or nobody will take you seriously. I'm not sure. Haven't really puzzled that out yet, but it got put aside. But I always thought, and after a while I got really learned a lot of Scarlatti sonatas, and I took heart from at least, I don't know how factual it is, but from the legend of Scarlatti really not writing, or at least not publishing anything until he was 50 years old. And then he cranked out 550 sonatas in the last 15, 17 years of his life. And I thought, well, if he can do that, I'm in good shape. I can handle this. And I'll get around to it, because building a career as a guitar maker, but also building a family with 4 kids, and ultimately single dad with 4 kids, there wasn't a lot of time to add any agenda items and things. So making guitars, it worked out okay. If I just stood in my basement or my garage and just made one guitar at a time, I don't think I could have done it. I did get involved in manufacturing overseas, and so sort of leveraging and creating more commercial products, great products, and working with developing the Cordoba line for those guys at Santa Monica, and other things that translated into bigger business, and then ultimately it's like shrinking back down again now, which is kind of cool. It's a nice arc. But along with that has been the arc of coming back to composing. Now, when I was in my 30s, I said, well, I'll get around to it. I mean, Scarlatti didn't do it till he was 50. I was in my 40s, said, I'll get around to it. Scarlatti didn't do it till he was 50. And then I missed that deadline. 50. Didn't do it. I was busy, you know, and I kept thinking, oh, I could do this and that. And then 60, missed that deadline. Well, actually, I did write a piece in 2010. And somebody asked me to publish something. He wanted to publish something that was back from the 70s. I said, no way, that'd be awful. And so I wrote something brand new out of cold water in 2010, but then nothing. And until 2018. And then I was looking through this stuff. It's really so pathetic. Then I wrote this, and it's like, this is, I mean, it's awful. It's like with Scotch tape and scissors. And that was my technology. That's what I had to, you know. But that was it. It's like the chords and the technology. That's what I had. That's what was left over from the 70s for me. And I thought, well, there was a composer named Lou Harrison. He's been gone for maybe 10 or 15 years, but he was a neighbor of mine. And I got to hang around with him quite a bit in musical and non-musical situations around Santa Cruz. And once I don't remember exactly the context, but I was asking questions. It was like an interview or a panel or something. And I asked him how he was so prolific, because he was. And he could write in all kinds of styles, and he was born in like 1917. But he just cranked out so many different styles and so much volume of music. I said, well, where do you find the time? He said, there's no time. There's only stolen moments. And I kind of got that. And I carried that around in my head even while I wasn't doing anything. But that's what that was. And actually, so then I worked this out. I'm going to play it. This is not a concert, but I'm going to play it anyway. It became the thing, and so this was in 2018, and that was when I was 70. So I made that deadline. Okay, I missed the others, but I got that one. And so Eric Cassell, do you hear Eric? No, I saw him just a minute ago because he brought some new publications. But he's in Quebec and he runs Productions d'Oz or Doberman Ipan. And I would just send him scans of this stuff. And he'd go, oh. But then he'd send it back. And it's like, okay. And kept going. And then we got to this. You know, and it's beautiful. And I can read it. And other people can read it too. So that was a trip. And that was how I got that whole thing kick-started. I need to find my tape. I thought I had it. Excuse me, just a second here. mean, this is our GFA audience, but I'm gonna play anyway. So like I said, it's just out of the harmonies that I knew at the time. So anyway, that just felt good to just write something, And but I didn't really have anything to go on, except no classes or no teachers at that time. Just the sound, and the kind of thoughts, and the touch. And those are the materials, and that was great. And so that kind of, it didn't immediately kickstart, but then it's 1920 and the whole pandemic thing, and I got isolated at my home, which is a wonderful place. I was so glad. It was just, actually, I was grateful not to have to be running around so much, to get off of the treadmill for the rat race. And after watching Netflix for maybe a couple of weeks and eating sandwiches, then I just started writing at that point. Said, well, this is great. This is a great opportunity. And so I put a piece of paper, it's another one of those pieces of paper in that pile, on my kitchen table, wrote a melody, just a page long, and then every time I'd go by, I'd like add something to it. Vertically, mostly. But eventually came out a piece called Solitaire, which was really nice. And I'd send that scribbly copy to Eric, and he would send it back as lovely and great music, and that was great. Now, of course, there wasn't any opportunities to play at that time. No gigs, so the restaurant gigs and that kind of stuff that I would have, they disappeared. But, I just kept writing. So about once every 2 months, every 3 months, piece between 3 and 6 minutes long that started piling up. And so that kept going. Eventually, so I did get some coaching, first from Johannes Muller, and I got some very good lessons from Stephen Goss, who's sitting there. And so he's a composer that I know. But he said, we were talking about it, and I was such a Luddite, really. I mean, the pencil and paper, I was saying, I can get Eric to write it, to engrave it, so I don't need to I need to learn those skills. Because I didn't want to learn the skills. I mean, I have a hard enough time just setting an alarm on my phone and so on. And so why did I want to learn to do anything on a screen? And especially if you look at Sibelius or at Finale, and I looked at it a little bit, and there's these little pull-down menus, and it's keyboard commands and stuff. I said, that'd make me crazy. I don't want to do it. But Stephen said, well, yeah, God, it's not, I can get Eric to do the typesetting, but it's the playback that you get out of putting it on. Because I can write that, but I can't just play it. And anything that I'm writing now, the piece that I'm writing last week, I'm sitting and playing it with a metronome at half speed. I wrote it last week, I wrote every note of it, but I can't play it. I can learn it. And it's just the same as learning a piece by whatever, by Scarlatti or Ponce or whoever music you like. And I have to struggle through it like that. So in the composition process, it's weird. I mean, this is sort of tacky, but I write it like that first, at least get it started, get it so it's kind of coming to the end. And then what I found is this, and I don't know how many people know about something like this. I didn't, and that's what was the big obstacle to getting into notation. But let me see, how do I do this? Just here, I went and got an iPad. My old iPad was not any, it's too old. And then this pencil, and so you can write on this. I did not really prepare a demonstration of it, but you can write, and it'll not only print it like that, but it'll play it. So this is a piece that, I mean, so that then you can hear where it's going. And you know, Beethoven didn't have one of these. And he could hear where his stuff was going. And it's crazy because during this time I was listening to a lot of Beethoven. And, you know, I thought, God, how did he do that? Now he had access to orchestras and stuff. All I had was myself. So I could play it and I could learn these things. And I'm not going to go through this whole thing. It's kind of cool. But it doesn't sound like the same thing. Yeah, I like that. All right, stop. You know, it doesn't sound like a guitar at all. I just barely started to learn that. So it's like the correspondence between that and just this chord. This sounds better, but I can't play it. So I could listen to it there, go through, and I've learned to do enough cutting and pasting, but the main thing was being able to write it with the stylus. I'm sorry that I probably should have done some sort of over projection, but you can look this up. It's called staff pad. And if you're, I ran into an old buddy of mine who's only written with a pencil and paper the other day, and he was doing some vocal music for his family to sing on 4th of July. Some 4-part stuff, and he had all these nice pencil written parts out. I said, here, try it on this. And so he worked on it. If you're old school and hate pull down menus and mouses, then I really recommend this. It's really fun, staff pad. And it's not a household word, obviously, but and it was hard for me to learn to work this stuff, but I've gotten it so that it's at least functional. And so then, now I can at least listen to it, and it'll print. It prints a legitimate copy, but not nearly as good as Eric's, not nearly as good as the DAW stuff. And I still find that when I give, and I have to write in all the fingerings and try to learn to do dynamics and make a whole presentation, and then when I send it off, it's interesting because then sitting down and learning the piece from the new score, from the upgraded score, it's like, wow, it's so much easier to play, to read and to see what's really here. So Eric just brought me these things today. So this, he finally, they just said, I was self-publishing, and I self-published all my stuff, but Eric just came down from Quebec and handed me copies, because Jaws and Doberman are publishing all my stuff now, and I'm really proud of that, and really excited to be relieved of that responsibility. I've been so self-taught and such a sort of like fix-it-myself person for the last 60 years that it was my compulsion to do that with this publishing and stuff, but I don't have that much time now. And so I had all the time in the world before, not now. So it's really great to have the support of really true professionals to do that. And, you know, I played one of the suites that is there, and so it's going to be up at Strings by Mail in Dawes are kind of like, in terms of exhibiting here, they're really pretty much together, and that stuff is all going to be available, plus successive things. This is only 2 books out. I've got 4 books to publish right now, and whatever comes up. But they're going to handle all that, and I guess you just like look it up on the website and push yes, and it downloads to you, or you can buy the books or whatever, and that's just wonderful, from either Doberman Dawes or from Strings by Mail. So that's cool. This is kind of a coincidence that these books just arrived like 45 minutes ago here, and just opened it up, and I haven't seen them in focus now, so that's pretty cool. And I played one of the suites, it's called Lost and Found, about a year ago. I played it for the really great guitarist, Vietnamese guitarist Thule. Really interesting woman, really virtuoso player. And I've known her for a while. She's a curious person. Anyway, I played a suite for her about 12 minutes or something, and she listened carefully, and she was, you know, attentive, and she was hearing what was going on. And at the end she said, well, you play that pretty well. I'd love to hear this music played by somebody who's really good. And I said, yeah, me too. So anybody out here? That's where kind of it's at now. I did do a performance, a house concert in February at a friend's house, so that they have regular house concerts. It was the first time I played virtually the whole repertoire. It was a two-part concert, house concert, maybe 50 people there, and you know, sort of DJ'd it so that it was all good, a good concert flow program, but it was all mine, 100%. I didn't know how that. I think I had the feeling it was going to be exhausting because it's all new. That it's just like that's too much for an audience to take in at once. I know it. I'm familiar with it all. I play it, I just want to play it all over again when I'm done. So I figure it must be likable, because I like it. And so that, I did that myself. But the probably more poignant agenda is finding other people who are willing or able to go through the trouble to learn the music, because it's not virtuoso music, but it's not easy. Most guitarists are not great sight readers, and it takes a bit to learn. But so I'm on the hunt always for somebody who is actually interested in playing it, because in some ways it's funny. I write the music primarily for myself, or I write it for an audience of people that I don't know, or sometimes there's passages that you're writing just for your person, you know, or your mother, or your wife, or your kids, or something, even just a few notes. It always evokes them. And, but in some ways, an important goal writing it for guitar players. And it's funny because it's like, well, this feels good. Now it starts out as being just really idiomatic, but then you start, when you freeze it on paper, you can start messing with it. And so then you can start writing things, transposing or inverting or whatever, all the little tricks that you can do to either to convert a phrase into another phrase or something, transitions. You can outright your ability to play. It's not like a rock and roll band where you're just like making up every line on the instrument at all. You freeze it, you work it out, then you unfreeze it and see how it animates. And so that's, you can outright what you can play, for sure. And I do it all the time, but not completely. So then it just takes a month or a year to learn to play it well. Anyway, the goal now, of course, is to get other people interested in music, not just me. I love it. It's great when I get a chance to play it. And, you know, when I get to hear other people play it, and there have been some fine players that are doing videos for me now and stuff, and I haven't got that aggregated yet. Almost. But it takes a lot of experts that are not me to get this kind of transition done and get things up to date online and wherever stuff is. So that's what I'm working on now. In a sense, this is a part of that, but it's just as much as anything to share the it's to share the transition from being, I mean, building guitars is kind of a harebrained scheme to make a living. It's not a great idea. It's really a great way to pass time and to evolve and to, you know, enjoy lots of different things, from the wood to the process to the results. That's really wonderful. This is an even crazier idea, even more harebrained scheme. But to go from one to the other, I've lived long enough that I kind of can afford that luxury. And that's where it's at right now. In some ways, I didn't ask anybody for permission. And I probably wouldn't have gotten it if I had. So it's just like, this could be fun. This could be satisfying. Will this matter to anybody else in the world? Probably not. Maybe a little bit. But I'm doing it anyway. So that's, I guess, more of what I have to say than about anything else in this, whether the guitars or the scores or the learning process. It's like, I just feel really lucky to have, at post age 70, been able to kind of fall in love like it's new, with something completely new, and to be, you know, out in no man's land, or in ignorance and naivete, and you know, try not to be scared, I guess, and get something done. And that's actually all I came to say. But I'm more than happy to, I kind of like talking about questions. We've got about, there's somebody else coming in at 11, and I don't know if my watch is right or not, but about 15, 20 minutes. But, oh, well, I can talk about the guitar just a little bit. I'm going to be on the exhibit. I haven't been there. I don't know where it is. 7th floor. 7th floor. Well, I haven't, I guess it's there. Oh. But this guitar, I call it a legacy for a lack of, I mean, I used to make guitars that were models because it was easier to market. And this is something that has kind of got, I'm calling it the legacy model. It's got sort of the kitchen sink in it. All of the different weird developments that I have done over the years. And I'm kind of like Dr. Frankenstein in that I always run all the experiments on myself first before I inflict them on the public. But this particular guitar, now I've been building double tops for a long time, since about 2000. And there's lattice brace double top, these sound ports, that was controversial and revolutionary when I first did it in 1998, and now everybody does it. But it's part of an evolution. I spent a number of years building very traditional guitars, specifically trying to replicate the old Masters, and did a lot, and it was good. It was a very, very healthy exercise. But eventually I had my own ideas and I started spinning off. The double top, I mean, I didn't invent anything. I have never invented anything, but I have reconstituted them into new recipes. And so the double top was a first significant departure, and then the bracing, I changed that. This particular guitar came along, you'll notice I play with a strap. I don't know why everybody does it. It's just ridiculous. I sat there with a footstool with these other things, my back is killing me, I'm dying. And then I just went, and I put strap-ons on my guitar. And went, that's an improvement. And then, but it was a little tippy. So it was tippy, just putting it on my regular guitar. So then I made another guitar and put the design, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a taper that goes this way on this instrument. So you got to make a guitar to do that. You can't change a guitar to do that. You can't retrofit it, but you can. And then it's like, oh, that's better. It sits right in there. And then later, this is like on 2-year increments or something. I don't know how long it takes. But then I had a pinched neck. At the same time Scott Tenney died. He had to cancel half a year's concerts. Well, I didn't have any concerts, but it was It's like, what can we do about this? And so I went, and I thought, oh, you know, it hurts, that holding the guitar hurts. So I went over to the bandsaw, lifted the sculpt thing way up on my guitar. So you do it this way. So the bandsaw's going like that. And you just cut this off here. And didn't even loosen the strings. And then you go and sit down and say, well, that feels better. That's better. Yeah. It sounds different because it's a big old hole here. But the crazy thing, it didn't even go out of tune. I mean, you'd think it would just fly apart if you cut this off, that the strings would pull it apart. Yeah. It's surprising what you can get away with murder sometimes. Nobody knows. So then they did that. And that was, it keeps getting better. Keeps falling into place better. Then there was, it's like I was practicing a lot for some reason. I usually practice sitting on the couch. I've got a studio where I do my composing and stuff, but a lot of it just on the couch. But I was practicing quite a bit for some of it, I don't remember what, but I was having this pain in my chest. I thought, oh God, I got a tumor in my chest. And then I looked and went, ah. And then I just went back over to the bandsaw. This off. And so then it's like, oh, tumor's gone. And so that became what is basically an ergonomic statement, evolution, design, not an invention really, but it just kept making it more comfortable. And you maybe don't worry about what the comfort level is when you're in your 20s or 30s, but sooner or later it's going to catch up with you. And we all have got aches and pains that come from lots of things, from just being alive. But this work really did a lot. See, this changes the position of your shoulder. If you imagine that this would be out here and that place would be there and then reaching around, that's not good. This is just like, okay, I'm back just sitting on a chair. And sitting is not necessarily good for you, but this is better this way. And so those were all of the ergonomic things. But then I got turned on to this Swedish invention. Again, this is not something that I invented at all, and I didn't want it. I got this fingerboard and these frets from True Temperament in Sweden, in Stockholm. And it sat around in my shop for at least a year, maybe it was 2 years. And I was thinking, this is too geeky for me. You know, who needs, I mean, guitar's geeky enough. How about not worry about that? But then I finally tried this fingerboard, and I guess you can see it. It's not your eye prescription. These frets are not straight. And then I went, oh no, it sounds better. And it does. And the hardest part is trying to describe why. I mean, the main thing is that each string is different than the others. So actually the mathematics or the arithmetic that works for laying out fretboard, fret positions is great on paper, but when you actually put it into practice, because the strings, the 6 strings are so different, and even that they behave differently along the length in terms of tension, that the pitches that result from traditional frets are a little bit off. We're used to it, it's fine. As somebody said at last year's show, if it was good enough for Segovia, it's good enough for me. But this is better. And you can judge for yourself when you come and try it if you want to, up on the 7th floor. But it's not radical, it's not so conspicuous, but I think that just putting these notes together, and it's just equal temperament. It's not like some mean tone or you know, perfect intervals or anything like that. It's just getting an authentic equal temperament instead of sort of a roughly equal temperament. But that purity of sound that comes through enhances the whole bloom of the whole instrument. It's not just that that particular chord is going to be sweet or that interval is you know, you can't contest it, but it actually makes it easier to go through key changes and to kind of go, well, that was always a chord that I was trying to get away from, and now I want to stay there. And so that's the overall effect of it. The most difficult thing about it is that it looks so weird. And so everybody has to comment on it. And if you're playing in public, then somebody says, oh, you're drunk when you made that, you know. They're like, what? You don't know how to make a guitar, and I've listened to that. Because everything that I've done here, somebody said, well, that's ridiculous. And I just don't care anymore. So that's, but it is hard to talk about. This is hard to talk about because it doesn't come naturally to anybody to understand it. And the scientists that I will read trying to understand it make it impossible to understand. Really impossible. So I can't win, really, or you can't. Somebody can. But it's a wonderful little feature. And so really, I'd rather talk about questions now than try to just fill time. Great.
Yeah, Kenny, when you start with a piece of music, do you have an overriding idea of where that music's going, or do you start with a little motive and then develop it?
Both. Sometimes, you know, I mean, a piece of music is like, it's storytelling. And this is all pretty tonal. I mean, that's the most tonal. That's like, there are no sharps and flats in that whole piece. There's one flat that comes in at the end. And that's what I was working with then. But I'm trying to get more harmonically developed just because out of my own interest. But that's not what I was trying to talk about. The music is, it's an architecture, it's like storytelling. And it's kind of like a detective story or something sometimes, where it's like, maybe you know the ending, but how do you get there? You know, do you lay clues along the way? Or sometimes you only got the beginning. But I figured it's like, you start piling up elements that are related, and I do just fiddle around. It comes from fiddling around to begin with, but then the architecture starts to get in, and then it's design. And that's where so much I just relate to guitar building and composing as something very similar. It's design. And, you know, you create doubt, and then you create resolution. Maybe you know where you're going, or maybe not. But almost always, if you look at stuff, the arcs are pretty similar. You know, you kind of go kind of there, and then you go up, and then maybe you go up a little more, and then you go down, and you go horizontal, and you surprise, and then back up and refer back to where you were. These are really common things, whether it's relationships, whether it's in music, in writing language, or even in, you know, my garden. That, you know, this has got that going, and this has got these little details, and there's that smear over there. So that piece I had, the rhythm was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was an arpeggio. And I didn't know what music, I just was playing that on the strings, open strings. And, well, I'm going to do something with this. And there's a melody. And then, you know, well, even think of it in terms of a song, when you need a bridge. You know, you can't just play the same verse over and over again, or the same chorus over and over again, and something else happens. Yes?
Mine isn't a question, it's a statement. I beg to differ with your opinion of Lutheran. I believe it's the highest form of artistic expression. You know, three-dimensional in a sense. I mean, first of all, you have a beautiful looking, that could hang on the wall even if it didn't produce music. But it produces music, and it pleases both the performer and the audience. So that's my
I don't differ with you on that at all. That's not a difference. That's the beauty of it. I mean, it's a core thing. And it is so wonderful because you start out with the raw material of wood. Even if you go to the mill, the dirt from the wood that the wood came from. And then you get to go through that form, but then that form becomes a function that is so sublime, and you could say it's almost not connected, that it changes you into another dimension, because this is static. It's not alive until the music comes to it. And that's why the touch of it is so thrilling. And the sound and the warmth. Also, the evolution of the sound. It's amazing what kind of transformation a guitar goes through in just the course of its lifetime. Even if you're just hanging on the wall and you come back 2 years later, like, what is this beauty? It was nice before, but my God, it's heartbreaking now. And so and what people can do with it and how it fits into your life. I mean, in some ways, I think of it like my cats. You know, it fits really well and it gives me pleasure every day. And doesn't really ask anything back. Don't have to feed it though. Please, box.
And it's organic.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt anything. I mean, this is the one thing about that's really nice about guitars. Yeah, there's consuming in the building. There's consuming of a resource, but it is such a micro consumption that it's irrelevant, really. You can find somebody who will still want to put you out of business, but that's a thing. But then the music, it's like it doesn't hurt anything. It does only good. It does no harm. And I love that. Anybody else? Yes?
So when composing, how do you choose when you use a capo? To add the capo in? You compose?
Well, that is a funny use of a capo because, I mean, you use kind of tricks. The capo is, it's sort of like tuning. Okay, so you got a drop D tuning. Okay, there. I wrote another piece that I tuned the A down to a G. And 3 pieces came out of that, and that was cool. It like helps you to discover something that maybe, because you work, especially if you work on the guitar, you work from your habits sometimes. Or maybe it's not work, play through your habits and then see what happens. In this case, the capo is on only 5 strings. So it creates an atmosphere. So I was able to write in C major, you know, just, but it doesn't sound like C major. It doesn't sound like the cowboy C major. So that's where I did that. It's just like to stir the pot, maybe. And you could, so it gives you just, it's one of the tricks to trick yourself into doing something different. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah.
When composing, I was wondering how you get out of the box of thinking as a guitarist, because I feel like when I think of my favorite 20th century composers, they weren't necessarily guitarists, and I think they did so many wonderful things because of that.
What do you say, good parts? I didn't know.
How do you get out of thinking as a guitarist? When you
As a
compose?
guitarist? I don't, actually. But I've listened to a lot of other music. I don't listen to guitar music hardly at all. I've been listening to African music. I've spent the whole time listening to all the Beethoven piano sonatas. I was recently listening, Ben Verdery, last time I saw him a few months ago, gave me all of his original music CDs. So I listened to all that stuff, and that's still like not being a guitarist, because he is all over the place. It was really fun to listen to it. But it's more like thinking of it as a language that you're speaking, I think. And I'm probably not out of it. I am writing really idiomatically. And maybe it's okay for me. Whether it'll stay that way forever, I don't know, because I'm pretty new at this. Some people would say, it sounds too much like New Age music or something, if you write idiomatic. It's like you have to make it difficult to play or make it sound like something you've never heard before. That seems to be part of the fashion of composing, not just for guitar, but certainly for guitar. It's to make it angular and less approachable, let's say. And I can dig that, but it's not the only thing. So I am not getting out of the box as a guitarist, I guess is probably the real answer. We're gonna run out of time, so let's, rather than impose
I'm gonna just play one more piece.
And these are pieces that are, you know, pretty straightforward. This was called originally the wedding song. 2 years ago today, I don't know, this month, last week or something, my youngest son got married. Wonderful woman, Katie. They're so good. They're all right around 30. And now, anyway, I wrote the song for the wedding, but it was subtitled "Dad's Gonna Cry." And then last week, they told me they're expecting their first baby. So now it's just "Dad's Gonna Cry."